and so does the balance of obligations between the employer and the employee. I've dealt on the immediate measures needed before and will not enlarge on them today. But I say this: because of the ties of the Labour Party with the trade union movement, because the trade union movement effectively controls the conferences and executive of the Labour Party, and because it provides some 90% of the finance of the Labour Party, I don't believe a Labour government will ever make the necessary changes. The right honourable gentleman could have taken action with our support. He chose not to do so. He is the prisoner of his own history in this matter. The unions were his stepping stones to power, and they know it. So be it. Changes will have to be made by another government, and I believe they will have the overwhelming support of the people, including the majority of trade union members. On the economic side, we have to break through the prosperity barrier in manufacturing industry. We can only do so if, through good management, proper incentives and cooperation, we are able to cut restrictive practices and raise output per person. Mr. Speaker, if we spend half as much time on policies to raise output as we have on policies to increase pay, we should have a higher standard of work and hence a higher standard of living now. The truth is that in the countries of our main industrial competitors, union and government policies have combined to do far better for union members than is the case in Britain. The fourth point is one which pervades the whole life of the community: the rule of law. This government has shown insufficient support for the rule of law in this country. The most cogent example of that proposition came from the Lord President in 1977 when he said, "It does so happen to be the case that if the freedom of the people of this country, and especially the rights of trade unions, if those precious things in the past had been left to the good sense and fair-mindedness of judges, we would have precious few freedoms in this country." Some of us were so appalled at what the Lord President had said that we tackled the Prime Minister about it in the House of Commons. The Prime Minister said, "Frankly, I don't think he went far enough." They set the tone. Events of the winter produced the new phrase for the Attorney General, lawful intimidation. The Prime Minister and his ministers take that view of the law. It's not surprising that others will follow. And of course, it was not long before one of the trade union leaders did. He said, "My advice is to carry on picketing. I cannot see union members accepting the court decision. They will inevitably act in such numbers that the authorities will have to use football stadia for detention centres." That is the rule of the mob and not the rule of law. And it ought to be condemned by every institution and minister in the land. As it is, the people have identified the weakness far quicker than the government. Go anywhere in the country and the demand will be for two things: less tax and more law and order. The phrase law and order refers not only to vandalism and violence, although that's uppermost in many people's minds. It also refers to something else. It means that our citizens expect and are getting an ordered or orderly society. They expect the rubbish to be cleared, the schools to be open, and the hospitals to be functioning, and they are not. They expect each man and woman to rise to his obligations in an ordinary and decent way. They expect bargains to be kept between trade unions and employers as well. And they expect ministers to support them in those views. In the recent closure of schools, the authorities did not support the law-abiding citizen or his children. It was the citizens who had to go to the courts when their children were denied access to the schools. It was the law which upheld the parents when they could not persuade the council or ministers to help. The Secretary of State for Education took the view, astonishing as it may seem, that the council had not failed to discharge their duty. The Right Honourable Lady has been prepared to pass new laws to close good schools. It's a pity she's not been as eager to use existing laws to keep present schools open. At least there was a law to invoke. There are many cases now when the interests or livelihood of a person can be changed or taken away and there is no remedy at law whatsoever. That is the legacy of this government. After 5 years, it's not surprising that our people want the benefit of having a government which regards the maintenance of the rule of law as the foremost of its tasks. There we have the record and some of the reasons for failure. Each crisis, industrial or financial, has been met by short-term measures, but there's been no serious attempt to deal with the underlying problems. On the contrary, they are worse. The government has doubled prices, doubled dole queues, doubled debt, diminished our defences, and undermined public respect and confidence in the law. But I believe that this is not only a failure of policies, but of the whole philosophy on which they are based. The philosophy which elevates the state, dwarfs the individual, and enlarges the bureaucracy. Across the Western world, the tide is turning against it, and soon the same thing will happen here. I return, Mr. Speaker, to the occasion for the motion. It's a motion which arose out of a constitutional matter affecting the whole House. Honourable members from all sides made an eminently reasonable request to the Prime Minister that he should determine the matters outstanding from the referendum by the end of this month. He deliberately chose not to make a matching response, but to try to manipulate the situation for his own ends. He can have no grounds whatsoever for anger if others judge it for the manoeuvre that it was. Nor in view of the government's conduct of parliamentary matters during the last 3 years can he complain if his present action is dubbed characteristic. It's not unusual for minority governments to carry on for a considerable period of time as this one has. What condemns the Prime Minister now is the justified feeling that the substance of matters before the House takes second place to the survival of the government. That feeling is widespread, and it robs this government and the Prime Minister of authority, credibility, and dignity. The only way to renew the authority of parliamentary government is to seek a fresh mandate from the people and to seek it quickly. And we challenge the government to do so before this day is through.